Just a couple words about the Taxpayer Association. We've been at this for 10 years now, and I think this is our 9th annual barbecue. And we see this quite often. We see the same faces. They're kind of like old friends getting together once a year. Over the period of time, we've done a few things that most of the public doesn't recognize. We work to try to make our general plan freedom friendly. This means respect of property rights and respect to the Constitution. In the wording of the present general plan update, and of which the DEIR is reviewing, is some real clear wording that the general plan objective is to support our U.S. Constitution and the rights to life, liberty, and property. Very clear. During the time when Mittner Harnish was conducting the general plan, they were very strict in following an ideological pattern that was not always friendly to property rights. So you'll see some signs to my right, and those signs appeared all over the county. And because there were a lot of properties that were being downzoned. They were zoned 5 acres, and they were being downzoned and increased, so your minimum parcel size would be like 20 acres and sometimes larger. And of course they did that for the public good, but they forget about the property rights of the people that own that property. They bought that property, many of them, because they had a future in mind of what to do, maybe to build 4 homes or maybe to split it for their family in the future. So the work we did, another thing we did, they came up with 3 alternatives, all of them which increased governmental control over private property. In one of the study sessions, we came up with a 4th alternative. The 4th alternative respected private property rights. And believe me, they didn't like that alternative, but that alternative, even not being promoted by their structure, won 10% of the vote. That's pretty good. So just being our Taxpayer Association, doing what we think is right, makes a little bit of a change, and that little bit of change moves it to the day when our children can live in a free society, which is really what makes it really worthwhile. So as we move to our next item is a pledge and invocation. I don't have a person for the invocation. Normally I have one of our members. Is anybody here able to do an invocation? Maybe a pastor? But in any case, we can do the pledge. Sheriff, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And the flag is right in front of me. States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we don't have an invocation. If I try to do an invocation, I'd botch it, and then I'd never be forgotten. Our next item is a presentation of our CCTA Award for Excellence in Public Service. This goes to Mike Johnson, Chief Mike Johnson of Ebbets Pass. Also, presentation of certificates from the State Assembly. The State Senate also has a certificate, but we haven't received it yet, so he's going to get that one in the mail. And Supervisor Mike Oliveira has agreed to present the presentation from the State Assembly to the Fire Chief, and then I'll present the one for the Taxpayer Association. Why don't you come up, Mike?
Al, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, the first one, I'll go ahead and get out of the way.
You're going to stand on this side? Okay.
Yeah. This is our Excellence in Public Service Award to Mike Johnson, Fire Chief of Pat's Fire District, in appreciation for his leadership with a focus on fire safety among his firefighters and in the community at large. He's just done a fantastic job. Mike? You got a picture? Okay, the next one is from the Assembly.
Okay, Al, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out. Thank you for the warm welcome. Before I make this presentation, I've got a couple of words I'd just like to say. I've known Chief Johnson for about 3 years, when he first came to Ebbets Pass Fire District from Las Vegas, California. Las Vegas, Nevada. During those short 3 years, I've interacted with him nearly daily. He is the guy that makes me proud of Ebbets Pass Fire District and proud of Calaveras County. Not only his professionalism, his ability to speak with people, not at people, his ability to get the job done, his ability to be responsible to the board of directors, which we have Tom Sullivan here, a board member of Ebbets Pass Fire. But most importantly, Mike's a friend of mine. We're going through some very crisis times right now with our forest fires and our wildfires. And Mike and I are talking on the phone along with our emergency services director, Michelle Patterson, within minutes. That gives us the opportunity to tell our people that are in danger or could be in danger and give them a chance to evacuate and be safe. It's very important right now, folks. We have been very, very fortunate. Let's hope we can stay safe and stay fortunate. With that, this is from the California legislature. Certificate of recognition presented to Mike Johnson, Fire Chief, Ebbets Pass Fire District. Congratulations upon receiving the 2018 Calaveras County Taxpayers Association Excellence in Public Service Award. Thank you for your focus for fire safety in our community, Mike. August 9th, 2018, signed Assemblymember Frank Bigelow, Senator Tom Berryhill. All yours, Mike.
Thank you, Supervisor Oliver, and thank everyone. I'm humbled, number one, to even be considered for such a recognition and an award. Honestly, to tell you a little bit about myself, number one is I like people, number one, and like interacting with them. And so therefore public service is probably a good fit on that hand. But more than that, I like working and living in Calaveras County. I'm so privileged to be the fire chief here at Ebbets Pass, and even more so is the fantastic people I get to network with all the time from our public safety group that I get to work with on a regular basis, with the fire agencies, with the sheriff. I tell you what, it's a true privilege to be doing this job. It's a true privilege to be working for our community and working all throughout Calaveras County. And the Calaveras Board of Supervisors has certainly given us a lot of support with the local fire agencies, and we just can't be more thankful or more blessed for all these opportunities and working hard for our community, and really, making our tax monies go as far as they can for public safety and public service in local fire. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're not done yet. The Congressman McClintock is here, and he has another award for you. Come on up, Tom. And this is another dignitary I failed to introduce, but he's going to be formally introduced by Eric Eisenheimer just before his talk.
Thank you. Well, Chief Johnson, I paraphrase Lincoln, the world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it will never forget what you did here for 25 years. And on behalf of a very grateful community that you watched over and protected for that quarter century, we present you with a small token of appreciation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
He's got a program called The Doctor's In, and I hate to say it, his is better than mine. Though mine is more controversial, and we have different speakers, he helps you stay well. Randy?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple comments about healthcare, maybe 5 minutes worth of comments. My 3? Okay, I'm down to 3. I think I can do it. So my whole world is about healthcare. This is what I do all day long. I'm the executive director of the healthcare district, the countywide healthcare district. I'm also a private practice doctor in Murphy's. I did that all morning. And I'm also on the staff at the Mark Twain Medical Center. This is what I do. And if you ask my wife, Kathleen, she'll tell you I do that 24/7. So I guess the message I would like to relate to you is, and I think you kind of know some of this, is healthcare in this country and in this state is very unstable. At every level, it's somewhat chaotic, particularly at the user level, at the doctor level, and the patient level. And if you look at the federal government, Senator Sanders wants health care for everybody. He's not quite sure how to pay for it, but that's what he wants. President Trump and his administration, different vision, more patient choices. The Obama files, I think that's what I call them, they have yet a different vision, and they think Obamacare is something akin to the Bible. And so there is no clear vision out of Washington about what to do with health care, and actually the federal government is the biggest insurer in this country. That's where most people get their health care. So if that's not confusing enough, the state of California, I think, is even worse. The state of California, I think, is pretty much committed to universal one-payer health care. I think that's what they're going to do. And if you look at what Governor Brown signed sometime this summer, it was Assembly Bill 1810, I believe. And what that bill said is everybody in California by 2021 is going to get universal health care. And they established a council. The council's appointed by the governor. It's got a $400 billion price tag, and they don't know how they're going to pay for it. I got a feeling you're going to pay for it. But I can tell you the state of California is committed to this. Now, what does that mean in Calaveras County? We've got the federal government who certainly can't agree. We've got a state government that's on a different track. And if you're concerned, you get it. If you're not concerned about future health care, then we should talk, because it's very uncertain right now. And it's very chaotic. So my position in this county and my board's mission is to ensure you guys have access to good care. You get quality care, you have hospital care, you have outpatient care, and we don't know what that's going to look like in 3 to 5 years. And we talk to a lot of people, and they don't know what it's going to look like in 3 to 5 years. So it's really worrisome. But what I can tell you is my board is doing some great things, and they're doing them for you, and I'm so proud of them. This year, they're securing a 30-year contract with Dignity Health, which means you're going to have a hospital that is functional and responsive for the next 30 years. There's a lot of counties that don't have a hospital. And the hospital they do have doesn't really have any money or support, and you probably wouldn't go there. So we've secured that 30-year lease with Dignity Health. We feel really good about that. We're building a clinic in Valley Springs. We expect to open it next year. This is a $8 million clinic. I am so proud of this. We think it's going to be a state-of-the-art model clinic for this county. It's through a federal loan, and the Dignity lease is how we're going to service that loan. So we're also partnering with Dignity Health, who's going to build a new clinic in Angels Camp. This county hasn't had 2 new clinics since anybody in here was born. I'm pretty sure about that. So that's pretty exciting. We also, this year, we established a partnership for a child advocacy program. And this is such a kind of a sad thing, but an important thing, is children are victims of crimes. Little children, 6-year-olds, 3-year-olds, they're victims of crimes. And so they can't just be put in the back of a patrol car. I mean, I can't imagine that, but that's what many, many places do. And this year we established a child advocacy program with the Resource Connection, and that program right now is managing 50 patients a month, I think. It's only been up for about 2 months, and it is doing a great thing for the child victims in this county. We feel really good about that. We also are talking to behavioral health people at the county, Health and Human Services, because we need more behavioral health in this county. Not because we're all crazy, but because behavioral health is an important part of healthcare wherever you go. And this county has its share. Whether it's substance abuse, depression, we have one of the highest suicide rates in the state. And so we've established that relationship. But we are trying to do more and more every day to serve you. And I feel excited that we're doing what you elected us to do. When we set up our relationship with Dignity Health, we had to come to you. We had to ask you, is this okay? Do you want a hospital? Is this the right deal? You approved that measure on the ballot by 90%. There isn't any ballot anywhere in the world that gets 90%. And your voice is loud and clear. We value healthcare. We want a hospital. We want a healthcare district. And we want to be able to live here and not have to travel for healthcare. So thank you for your support with the 90% with the ballot initiative. Thank you for your support with the district and with healthcare in general. And hopefully I can come back next year, Al, and give you another list of things we're trying to do for you. Thank you very much.
You can take it this evening if you want to. And so I've got the copy of it, and I talked to the sheriff. He'd be willing to
swear him in.
Swear you in. And so, Sheriff, here we are.
Thank you, Al. Well, for those of you that would like to be sworn in, I don't know what we're going to swear you in as. We won't swear at you, but we will swear you in. You raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of California, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and to the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations, you're now U.S. citizens.
That make open carry all right now, Rick?
Yeah, I'm all for that.
Makes 2 of us.
Yeah. I don't know what Al really wanted me to talk about. I'd like to talk about, because we're at a Taxpayers Association's meeting, I'd like to tell you about some of the ways the Sheriff's Office is saving the taxpayers' money. We have a young lady who just received an award from the International Chief Police Association. Her name is Brenda Henley. She is one of our mental health workers that works within our jails. I know Al talked a little bit about mental health earlier, the doctor talked about mental health in the county. It is a huge issue in our county, and this young lady, and there's a quote in the Calaveras Enterprise from me that said that this young lady could talk a monkey out of a banana tree. She is very, very good at what she does. I've worked with her when I was working on the streets, and she is able to get people services as opposed to going to the jail. Now, anytime they come into our jails, it costs the county a lot of money. So by her working with the deputies out on the street and with corrections inside the jail, she's able to keep a lot of these folks out of jail and gets them out of jail sooner. In that aspect, it saves the county a lot of money. So I'd like to congratulate her on winning this award. I know she's going to be going to a ceremony, I believe it's in October, to receive that award from the Police Chiefs Association. So that's one of the ways the county is saving money. The Board of Supervisors directed the CAO Tim Lutz to get all the departments to cut 5% from their budgets. Next to Health and Human Services, the Sheriff's Office is the next biggest budget in the county. The difference between the Sheriff's Office and Health and Human Services is Health and Human Services is probably about 80% state funded and or federal funded, whereas the Sheriff's Office is the biggest draw to the general fund. Working within our department, with my people in the department, we actually just pulled another little over $700,000 out of my budget, so that saves the taxpayer some monies. So we're working now as much as we can to keep you happy, because that's our goal in life. So that's pretty much what I have as far as taxpayers. Talk a little bit about marijuana, because then everybody wants to know about that. We've been continuing in doing our eradications. We've been hitting between 2 and 4 a week to get it cleaned up. I was talking to Congressman earlier. Last year, we had set aside 50 sites when we did our focus operation. Because of manpower and time, we were actually only able to hit 20. And this year, we were able to find somewhere between 15 and 20, so half of what we had last year. So the marijuana issue, as far as the illegals are going, have really subsided. And now that it's all illegal, it opens the door up for us to get more of these folks out of our county. So that being said, anything else, Al?
Good job.
I'm going to have the opportunity to talk to you just briefly about taxes, and which I heard y'all really like taxes. Is that what a taxpayer organization is about? Or yeah, they told me this was the Bernie meeting. Is this the Bernie Sanders meeting, or did I come to the wrong place? No. I'm looking forward to talking to y'all about what we're doing to fight taxes on behalf of taxpayers, and I'm certainly glad that I'm here this evening and not somewhere like the California State Legislature. I was just there the other day, and there's a lot of people there who they think they know everything, and they think taxes are the answer to everything. I was actually really surprised when they had the Me Too movement that nobody that I know of, maybe the congressman or somebody has actually heard of one, but as far as I know, nobody's proposed a tax to deal with that problem, because that seems to be their answer to every single problem is we need a tax for it. Well, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association has saved all of us here in California, over $500 billion since 1978 through Prop 13 alone. And that is a amount of money that blows my mind. But it's because of you all that Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and Prop 13 just celebrated its 40th year anniversary the other day. 40 years of Prop 13. And Prop 13 today is still as popular as the day that it was first passed, which is even as our states become so much more liberal. Howard Jarvis and the support for Prop 13 hasn't ebbed at all. We still, we in California, they've raised every other tax to astronomical heights, but fortunately, due to Prop 13, we still have a relatively reasonable property tax burden. And let me tell you, so because of those other taxes, all the crazy taxes they've raised to these astronomical heights, it's affecting our state. I think that you all have probably noticed it. I go to Nevada every now and then. I actually worked on a campaign in Nevada recently, and there's a road where if you're going to drive down to Las Vegas or any of the towns in the central part of the state, places like Tonopah and Hawthorne, and they're great towns. So if you ever have the opportunity, a lot of really good people in these little towns in the middle of Nevada. But if you drive out from Reno and take the 80 and go a little bit, the 80, I call it the 80, the word the. That's one of the hints that I'm from LA. Only people from LA call freeways the and then a number. That's where I'm originally from. But you drive down 80, that's the right way to say it, and you go down about an hour from Reno, take a right, and then head down. But what you'll notice, there are a lot of farms there now, a lot of dairies, and you know why they're there? They're from California. They don't like the cow flatulence law. They don't like the insane amount of taxes and the labor regulations and all of the global warming stuff that they got to document, and the global warming taxes and all of these things. They don't like it, so they're going there. They're taking those jobs. I read somewhere or heard somebody said, oh, well, you can't relocate a farm. Well, yeah, you can. And they're in Nevada, they're in Arizona, from California. That's just another type of jobs that we're losing because of our taxes and because of our regulations. The California state legislature, those people, I mean, their approval rating, I don't even know what it is, but it's ridiculously low. There's a lot of people out there that aren't happy with the job they're doing. We're maybe a pretty liberal state, but there's a lot of people that are fed up. You look at the gas tax. Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association was involved in the recall of Josh Newman. Any of y'all know who Josh Newman is? Okay, few of you. So Josh Newman is a Democrat from Orange County, and Josh Newman cast the deciding vote for the gas tax increase. Recently got elected, pretty conservative district, pretty mixed, and he got elected. Easily could have been a Republican, but they elected this Democrat named Josh Newman, who votes for a lot of really liberal stuff. He's not a conservative Democrat. He was a very liberal vote that they could count on for taxes, and they recalled Josh Newman. Taxpayers collected thousands of signatures. They got the recall on the ballot, and they recalled Josh Newman. Right? Yeah, people are fed up with a lot of these policies. So Josh Newman, he was recalled. The gas tax, it's on the ballot. It's Prop 6. People, they say, the tax raisers, the folks in Sacramento, they say they need the money for roads. They say that we need to pay one of the highest gas taxes in America because of, the roads. They don't have enough money for the roads. But you know what? it's not just me. I mean, these are my thoughts and my opinions, but a lot of Californians just don't believe them anymore. How do they have $1 billion for an expansion of the Capitol so that they can have these really nice new offices? How many of you have been to the Capitol? So, if you go to the part where the Assembly and the State Senate meet, where their offices are, it's it's okay, but it's not particularly luxurious or particularly glamorous. And if you're conservative, they actually have a place for you that they call the doghouse, where they put you. So I think Melissa Melendez is in the doghouse right now. It's an old closet. It used to be a closet, and that's where they put you if they think you're too conservative. But it's okay. It's not that luxurious, but there's nothing wrong with it. Well, they want to demolish it, and they want to build this whole grand thing, and it's going to cost almost $1 billion, and that's in the budget. Also, the California Air Resources Board, how many of you know about them? Mary Nichols. Mary Nichols has these really nice filters that she wants you to put on your truck. They'll make it... They'll make it catch fire. They'll make it break down. They've actually caused a number of forest fires, which are really bad for global warming. In fact, we've had so many forest fires recently that they think that we've caused as much of they've done in a number of years to get rid of global warming. All these fires have caused that amount of global warming, and it's because of their green policies, by the way. But Mary Nichols is going to get a beautiful palatial new building. It's going to cost $400-something million. They have money for that. They have money for these fancy new offices, but there's supposedly not enough money for roads. I don't believe it. And I think that the typical Californian doesn't believe it. That's what the polls show. So, we're getting fed up with this. They always need more taxes. And it's always, for ambulances, which is a real thing. They really are saying that. They need more money for ambulances because if we don't have the money, then we'll die. They need the money for the children, or they need the money for the environment. But they don't want to talk about all the ridiculous things, all the waste, all the fraud and abuse. One thing you should do when you have a chance, if you have a moment and want to be, depending on your perspective, entertained or very angered, go to the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association website and go to the studies and reports and look up the Follow the Money report. We do it in my office. It's an example of all the really ridiculous examples of waste, fraud, and abuse that are occurring every year in our government. So check that out when you have a moment. I also want to just very briefly mention there's something that's going to be on the ballot that if you are if you're a homeowner, if you're a renter, if you have any plans to move, this is relevant to you. It's called Prop 10. It's a statewide rent control measure. It's financed 98% by one guy from LA who put it on the ballot. It would empower local bureaucracies all over the state in hundreds of jurisdictions to pass their own rent laws. We have a patchwork of rent laws. These bureaucracies made up of political appointees, they'd be empowered to impose fees. They would be able to impose rent control on your single family home. So, a lot of us have thought about leaving the state. I'm just curious, how many of you have thought about leaving the state? Yeah, I definitely have. When I go to Texas, they're like, why are you there? Like, it's like they don't understand. They're like, well, it's so horrible. Why don't you come here like tomorrow? Like we don't understand why you've been there that long. And I'm not the only one. I have other friends that have gone to Texas, and that's apparently what they all say there. They all can't believe that we haven't come already. But they don't want the liberals. So I've got some good friends in Texas, and they say that there's a bunch of California liberals there that didn't know that the horrible policies here are what made them leave, and now they're trying to do them in Texas. So there are some folks that are upset about that, but I think that we all would be welcome. And my point, though, with that is that were you to move, and turn your home into a rental, your single-family home would be subject to rent control if Prop 10 were to pass. So it's a very extreme measure. It's very far-reaching, and from just a basic point of view, it doesn't do what it promises to do. It's supposedly a solution to our housing crisis, but all it would do is make it worse, because you're not going to want to build an apartment building if this law passes. So it's going to discourage people from creating new rental units, and it's going to only make the crisis worse. So those are a few things I wanted to share with you. I just want to thank you all for being here, and I think this is great that a group of people came out to stand up for their rights as taxpayers on a Thursday evening. Little bit of background on me, which is relevant to our illuminous next speaker. I'm originally from Southern California. I'm originally from the Thousand Oaks area, and I've always been conservative. I've gotten more conservative over time as I've become more educated as to the issues at hand. But I've always been conservative, but I never actually intended to work in politics. So I've been doing this for the last 10 years, but that wasn't the goal. My degree's in business. And when a certain local state senator at the time was running for office, I read about him, and I'm like, dang, this guy stands for everything that I believe in, and I wonder where he's from, and I want to help him. Turned out he's from right 10 minutes down the road from where I grew up. So I got to intern in his office, and I think that had I interned for almost any of the other politicians on either side of the aisle, I'm pretty sure it would have been a very short experience, and I would have just been, forget this, I don't want anything more to do with politics. But our current Congressman, Representative McClintock, is such a man of principle and integrity that it really made me want to stick with it. And he's got a phenomenal ability to, explain the Constitution and explain why we believe what we believe that impacted me tremendously. So with that, I'd like to welcome up our Congressman, Representative Tom McClintock.
As you can imagine, I've had an awful lot of interns come through my offices in the more than 30 years I've served in elective office. I've had some of them go on to become members of the Assembly, members of the State Senate, but I couldn't be more proud of this guy here. Alex has done tremendous service for the state of California with his work for the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, going on about 10 years now. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is a fairly small operation, and the contribution that Alex has made through his work there, I think, dwarfs anything any of us in public office could expect to accomplish, because he's been able to engage the people of California in a great crusade, not just on behalf of taxpayers, because really what we're talking about is liberty, freedom. Your freedom to enjoy the fruit of your own labor. Thomas Jefferson, in his first inaugural address, cataloged all of the blessings that the new country enjoyed: bountiful resources, freedom, protection from the corruptions of Europe by this vast ocean. He went down this long litany of blessings. And then he pauses and he asks, what more, fellow citizens, is necessary to make us a free and prosperous people? Still one thing more: a wise and frugal government that restrains men from injuring one another and leaves them otherwise alone to pursue their own interests of industry and improvement. This is the sum of good government and is necessary to complete our circle of felicities. And isn't that the case? That's what all of you are fighting for. That's what the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is fighting for. And they couldn't do what you do, or they couldn't do what they do without everything that you are doing. They are the watchdog. They are the Horatius at the bridge. But without the people of California behind them, they couldn't accomplish anything. And groups like this have set the example for counties across California. I've got 10 counties in my district. We've got many taxpayers association. I don't know of any that is more dogged in determination than this band of brothers and sisters right here. So thank you all for everything that you're doing. Thank you for your invitation tonight. Let me just for years all I've been able to tell you is what we should be doing to improve the economy. The last couple of years, I can now tell you what we have done to improve the economy, and it's working. And it's the same prescription that Ronald Reagan wrote for our country when he took over after 4 years of economic malaise by Jimmy Carter. And it comes down to this. Roll back the tax and regulatory burdens that are crushing the economy, and the economy will prosper. If you remember, he won his election in 1980 by asking Americans a very simple question. It was the most powerful question I think ever asked in American politics because it was self-evident to everyone who heard it. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Everybody knew how they were doing, and it wasn't good. In his first term in office, he produced one of the biggest tax reductions in American history and one of the biggest rollbacks of regulatory burdens in American history, and 4 years later went back to the American people and asked them exactly the same question as he had asked them 4 years before. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And he won one of the biggest landslides in the history of this country. Specifically because, again, it was self-evident to people. Now, I could quote you all of the statistics of the American economy and how it's improving. This last quarter, we saw more than 4% 4% quarterly economic growth. We are on track for at least 3.1% economic growth over this next year. That will be the first time in some 15 years that this country has exceeded 3% revenue growth. The Obama years were the only years in an administration since the Great Depression where not once did we exceed 3% economic growth. And now we're well on track to do that. And it's not an accident. I mean, every place I go, I ask folks, well, how's the economy doing in your lives? I mean, again, I can quote all the statistics, but if you're not feeling it in your own lives, those statistics mean absolutely nothing. And everywhere I go, the consensus is, yeah, I'm feeling a lot more secure about my job. There are a lot more opportunities out there. I just got a raise. I just got a bonus. And that's before you factor in the tax reductions themselves, which in this district alone amount to about $1,900 of savings for every family in the 4th Congressional District. Average tax savings, according to the Ways and Means Committee, $1,900. That's $1,900 that an average family now has to spend in local shops, to tend to their own needs, to provide for their own families. That's a tremendous story to tell. And it has produced the desired results and economic resurgence. The regulatory rollbacks that we have achieved, both by legislation and by administrative action of the President, has been actually a larger period of regulatory reform than we saw under Ronald Reagan. And the tax cuts, well, you're feeling them, I know, because you keep telling me you are. It's real. America is coming back, and it's coming back because we are returning the earnings of the American people to themselves so that they can spend it as they wish. A wise and frugal government. So that's where we are. There are a couple of things that do trouble me that are out there. One is the threat of a trade war. Tariffs are nothing more than a tax on imported products. Tariffs have been tried many, many times in the past. Thomas Jefferson thought that he could protect American manufacturing and finance the entire federal government by raising tariffs. It produced one of the biggest recessions in the history of the country. in response to the recession of 1929, Herbert Hoover imposed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. That was a steep tax on about 20,000 imported products. Many economists attribute that measure alone to turning the recession of 1929 into the depression of the 1930s. Tariffs do two things. They make products, they make material more scarce, and they raise prices. Every one of us is both a producer and a consumer in our society. No producer has ever been benefited by scarcer materials. No consumer has ever been benefited from higher prices. I thought Larry Kudlow and Art Laffer made a very good point in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago, and they pointed out, if we really want to screw over a country that we really hate, a country like Iran, without actually going to war, what do? We impose economic sanctions, right? Well, what are economic sanctions? Economic sanctions are impediments to that country's ability to import products. What are tariffs? Tariffs are impediments to our country's ability to import products. Why would we do to ourselves something we normally reserve for our worst enemies? Frederick Bastiat, writing over 150 years ago about these very same arguments as we're having today, pointed out all of the enormous wealth that we spent to tunnel through mountains, to bridge great canyons for railroads, to build transatlantic ships and all of the harbors that supported them, all of the roads that were being built at the time, the canals. And he asked the question, why do we build all of these things? For one reason and one reason alone, and that is to overcome the obstacles that nature has placed in our ability to trade with faraway places. What sense does it make, having overcome all of those natural obstacles, then to replace them with artificial obstacles of our own design? It makes no sense. And I've been very worried about the administration's approach on this until we met with Larry Kudlow, who's now the president's economic advisor and an ardent free trader, and Peter Navarro. There were about 20 of us members of Congress there at that meeting. And Kudlow was very, very clear. They are aiming for three things in our trade policy: zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, zero subsidies. That is the very definition of free trade. And it seems to be working. That was that week that the European Union sat down at the table and said, okay, let's talk about trade agreements to meet those three objectives. So I've been very queasy about the way the administration's gone about doing it, but if those are their objectives, I'm willing to cut them a lot of slack. And I feel very good now that not only is their objective sound, but they are achieving that objective, at least with this breakthrough with the European Union. So I think we can look ahead to some very good effects on our economy from our trade policy as we move forward. The other thing that threatens our economy is the massive budget deficit and the growing national debt. And I don't need to lecture you folks about that. You know exactly how dangerous that is to our country. History is screaming this warning at us that countries that bankrupt themselves aren't around very long, because before you can provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, you've got to be able to pay for it. And we are reaching debt levels that now threaten our ability to do so. Now remember, we cut taxes pretty dramatically. Do you know what happened to our revenues? They're up. In the first 9 months of this fiscal year, our federal revenues are up. That's how big the economic expansion has been. But our deficit's growing too, and our deficit is growing for only one reason. Our spending is growing 4 times as fast as our revenues. If you want to know everything there is to know about the federal budget, you need to know just 3 numbers: 26, 29, and 46. 26% is the increase of inflation in population over the last 10 years. 29% is the increase in federal revenues in the same period. So our revenues have more than kept pace with inflation and population growth. It's the third number that is killing us. 46% is the increase in spending at the same time. We are now on a approach to $1 trillion annual deficits. Now you have to understand, when we throw around $1 trillion in Washington, what we really mean is $8,000 from your family's budget. If we divide the number of households in America into $1 trillion, it comes to about $8,000 per household. So think of that as $8,000 that will be added to your credit card statement next year, and it's just as real as if it appeared on your credit card statement. In fact, you're required to pay that money back before you pay back your own debt, and the IRS is there to be sure that you do. So this is real money coming out of our future economic growth. And it's also coming out of our present economic growth. Because if any of you have taken out loans, you know there are a couple of things. The folks that loan you the money generally like to have you pay it back. And until you do, they charge you interest. Our government debt's no different. This year, on $22 trillion of debt, we are paying about $475 billion this year alone, just on interest. Now put that in perspective. Our entire defense budget is about $700 billion. $475 billion is what we are spending to accomplish nothing more than simply pay the rent on the money that we've already spent. They're expecting Treasury yields, that is the interest that is charged on the national debt, to increase to about 4% this next year. It's at about 2.8, 2.9% right now. That small increase of interest will add about another $250 billion of interest payments to the $475 we're already making once that churns through our national debt. You can see where we're going with that. This is the unfinished business of the Congress and the President. We have got to get spending under control. And we can't look to the Democrats for help on that. Their only problem is we're not spending enough money fast enough. But if we continue down the road we're on, we will watch this country face one of two things. Either a sovereign debt crisis. If you want to know what that looks like, it's going on in Venezuela right now. Within our own borders. It's been going on in Puerto Rico for the last few years. That's where a government actually loses its ability to borrow money, which is a lifeline in a crisis. When Puerto Rico was hit by the hurricanes, they were completely helpless to respond because they have no credit capacity. Nobody's going to loan them money. The other thing that can happen is a central bank can start buying up all the debt and suck the life out of the economy. A lot of you guys are old enough to remember the 1980s the way I do. Remember when Japan was going to eat our economic lunch? They were buying up all of our real estate, and they were just, Sony and all of these Japanese corporations were basically taking over the world market. They got into a pattern of heavy deficit spending. Their central bank, in order to avert a sovereign debt crisis, began buying up all that debt. It sucked the life out of the economy, and it's been flat now for more than a decade. The Japanese call it the lost decade. Same things have been retarding economic growth in Europe. So that's our future if we don't change our policies right now. The good news is it's a matter of simple public policy. I chair the Budget Task Force of the Republican Study Committee. That's the largest of the caucuses in the House of Representatives. We put forth a budget the last couple of years that will get us back to balance within 6 years. By the way, it will save Medicare and Social Security from bankrupting. But it needs to be implemented. And at the moment, the House does not have the will to do so. So that's our unfinished business, and we've got to deliver on that. But to deliver on that, we're going to have to be in a position to make public policy next year. So that's essentially where we are. We're in a very good economic spot right now, but we've got some very important challenges that we have to deal with and have to deal with soon. And that's where you folks come in. I've often reminded people that all of the debates that go on in Washington really don't mean anything. They're simply a reflection of the much larger debate that goes on among the American people every day. It's upon the outcome of that debate that the future of our country's decided. That's the debate that matters. It's the one that takes place over backyard fences and family dinner tables and coffee at Starbucks. And that's where each and every one of you is absolutely indispensable to the salvation of our country, because it is the time that you spend, whether it's writing blogs, letters to the editor, commenting on articles, what you do on Facebook, Twitter, talking to your neighbors, your friends, your co-workers. That's the debate that matters. And once that debate's resolved, it's simply reflected in Washington. I have to tell you, I am actually fairly optimistic about our prospects of maintaining a majority in the House. All of the commentaries are that they have to make big gains in California in order to take control of the House. That's why they're pouring all of this money into the congressional districts in California. And I think Eric summed this up very, very well. The stark contrast between the policies of the leftist government in Sacramento and the tax relief and regulatory relief that we have won in Washington, I think is a tremendous story to tell. We're watching the national economy expand. We're watching basically mourning again in America, as we saw during the Reagan administration under the same policies. We can point to that economic expansion and then point to what's going on in Sacramento right now. And the contrast couldn't be greater. We're seeing this now in our polling data. We're seeing it anecdotally across the state. People in California are getting absolutely fed up with the leftist policies coming out of Sacramento. If you look at California today, it's showing the same economic and social pathologies of any other jurisdiction where the left is controlled for more than a generation. Failing schools, fleeing businesses, skyrocketing housing prices, increasing crime. You can go through the long skyrocketing energy prices. That is the hallmark of leftist policies. We're seeing them in other parts of the country. We're certainly seeing them in other parts of the world. And we're seeing them in our own once golden state. People are getting fed up with the sanctuary policies. People understand that this is a direct threat to the public safety of their community. And you have to understand what's going on with these sanctuary policies. The left is asserting a doctrine of nullification, which was basically the central organizing principle of the Southern Confederacy. It arose in the beginning of the 19th century against federal tariff acts. What it does is to say that any state or jurisdiction that doesn't like a federal law is free to ignore it. Well, that is absolutely lethal to a constitutional republic like ours. The Constitution is very clear that there are certain powers reserved to the federal government, all others are reserved to the states. Immigration is one of the enumerated powers given to the federal government. The Supremacy Clause of the Constitution says that in those fields, federal law is supreme. What the state of California is saying is they will simply not recognize those laws. One of those immigration laws requires that a jurisdiction that is about to release a criminal who is not entitled to be in this country must first notify immigration so that they can take charge of that criminal while they're still in custody in jail and have them deported. Instead, these nullification sanctuary policies release the criminals directly back into our communities, and then ICE has to go and track them down when they're not disarmed, posing a danger to law enforcement and to innocent bystanders. The Orange County Sheriff's Department just published a study of all of the criminal, illegal aliens they were required to release under California law, and how many of them were soon rearrested for dangerous criminal acts. People don't get that. They understand the implications of these massive increases in our gas taxes. As was pointed out, Californians pay one of the heaviest tax burdens per gallon of gasoline in the country. We have for years. And we always rank near the bottom in our per capita spending for our roads. That is not the fault of taxpayers for not paying enough taxes. That is the fault of years of policies that have stolen those revenues from our highways for purposes unrelated to our highways. And then they hold those same highways hostage and demand still more money. People understand that. And Eric's absolutely right. That was the singular issue that recalled a Democratic state senator in a Democratic state Senate district. That's going to be on the ballot. And again, that offers us the ability to offer a sharp contrast between the policies in Washington and the policies in Sacramento. And then look at our water policy here in California. We live in one of the most water-rich regions of the country, yet we have a governor who has already signed a law that within 2 years' time, you're all going to... This is not some crackpot idea that's just floating around out there and is going to be talked about for a few weeks and then go away. This is a measure that has already been signed into law. If you're an average residential consumer, you use about 90 to 100 gallons of water a day to run the washer, to the dishwasher, to cook your food, to all the things we do to run our lives, about 90 to 100 gallons of water per day. Within the next 2 years, under this law, you will be getting a notice from your local water district telling you that you are mandated to cut back your water usage to 55 gallons per day per person. Almost cut your water consumption in half. This has nothing to do with drought or water availability. I want you to be very clear on that. You could be bailing water out of your living room and you're still subject to these restrictions. Now, I'm quite sure that 2 years from now, when people start getting these notices, there's going to be a political revolution in this state. We need to educate them to the fact that law is already coming. It's already been signed. And that is a warning to all of us as Californians. Sometimes it's a blessing, other times it's a curse. But it's always true in democracy. We get the government we vote for. And if it turns out to be a government we don't like, that's just nature's way of warning us that maybe we ought to be a little more careful about the votes we're casting. I think that's coming in California. I think that's going to also influence the federal races, and I think that that's going to be the foundation of another Republican majority in the 116th Congress. But it's going to require every taxpayer, every believer in freedom, every man and woman of goodwill in this state to be actively engaged in the political debate over the next 89 days. If you will do that, I am confident that we will see these uniquely American principles of individual liberty, constitutionally limited government, and personal responsibility advanced in the public policy of our nation for a generation to come, and it will produce the most prosperous and happy society that the world has yet seen. So thank you all for everything you're doing. Thank you for having me tonight, and look forward to working with you in the days, months, and years ahead. You've got a couple questions. I'll take a couple quick ones.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Congressman, what, in your opinion, what is the president's attitude and awareness about the federal deficit?
He has hired Mick Mulvaney as the OMB director. That was one of his first hires. I've worked with Mick for a number of years in the House. You will not find a more dedicated budget hawk than he. And he has put forth budgets from the president's office that do get us back to balance. The problem is we can't get the House to act on them, and that's been supremely frustrating. But you know, the president's intention is crystal clear, and he has made it very clear through his Office of Management and Budget that he's very serious about this. He recognizes the danger of debt. And the threat that it poses to our future economic growth. He's got his priorities right. The first thing we had to do was get regulatory and tax relief. We've got that. The economy is improving dramatically as a result. Now we have to get control of the budget, and we have to restore principles of free trade. And he appears to be moving in both directions. I wish we had a House that would give him more support, but perhaps this next year it will.
Congressman, thank you first off for coming.
Mm-hmm.
And second off, is there any intention of dealing with the censorship that conservatives are facing on the internet, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and the conservative voices being censored. What is there any plan on dealing with that and holding some accountability to these corporations?
There's a lot of discussion about that. Ultimately, though, I have trouble saying that the government ought to come in and mandate any private organization, even one as big as YouTube or Facebook, how to what they are allowed to post and what they're not allowed to post, or what they're required to post. I get very uneasy about that. I think public pressure is working. There is a lot to be said about a very simple concept called shame. Shame is what regulates human behavior. Shame is what causes us to ask ourselves, would our mother really approve of what we're doing? Shame is what motivates us to seek the respect and admiration of our fellow citizens. And I think that just bringing out all of these abuses is doing a lot to shame the leadership of Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. And I think that is probably the best way to deal with these issues. There's another way to deal with them, and simply don't use them as platforms anymore. I know that's easy to say when they're the biggest, most influential platforms in the world, but don't forget, they simply replace other platforms that were once the most powerful in the world until people simply stop paying attention to them. And I do think they run the risk for their businesses of having conservatives, which is at least half of the country, saying, I'm tired of all of this abusive behavior. I don't think I'm going to pay much attention to Facebook anymore. And that, by the way, that's exactly what's going on. I believe Facebook use is now declining dramatically, and I think part of that's because of the abusive partisan behavior of its management. So I think competition and shame is probably the best way to deal with that issue without bringing the government in and telling any organization what they can or can't say. Yeah, Mike?
Congressman, thank you for coming. You've struck a nerve when we talked about sanctuary, especially for the state of California, but let's talk about here in Calaveras County. Where do you see the federal government coming against those states that refuse that constitutional right?
Well, there's a big effort that I'm a part of to cut off federal funding to those states. I mean, if a state is refusing to enforce federal laws, they should not be receiving federal dollars. So I mean, that's one way to deal with it. But again, and I think the House is of that sentiment. The problem is we haven't been able to get the Senate to agree. So ultimately, I think obviously it's being litigated in the courts now, and I mean, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I can read simple English, and I believe that this Supreme Court is going to look at the Constitution and say, immigration, that is exclusively a federal domain, supremacy clause, that trumps all state laws, and I think that they will ultimately uphold the president's actions on this, uphold the federal law, and at that point, any state or jurisdiction that refuses to respect that is stepping across a very bright line.
Thank you, Congressman.
So right now it's in the courts, and I think that's the place to resolve it. Great. I'm going to have to head off. I want to thank you again for everything you're doing. Just keep doing it. It's working.
Thank you, Congressman.